Welcome. I'm so glad that you could join us today for another wonderful Master Gardener program. We are joined today by Nicole Pinson. She is a Master Gardener Volunteer, and she's going to teach us all about edible flowers. I've also got my pal Chris on here. She is one of our wonderful branch librarians, and she's going to be helping me keep an eye on that chat box for any questions that might come in. So Nicole, thank you so much for joining us today. I'm so excited for this program. I love our Master Gardener programs, and what better way to enjoy that than to eat it too. Have your cake and eat it.
Yeah, thank you for having me. All right, do you want me to go ahead and get started?
Yeah, sure. Go ahead and share your slides.
All right, so my name is Nicole Pinson. I am a Master Gardener Volunteer with the UF IFAS Extension in Hillsborough County, and I'm really happy to talk with y'all today about edible flowers. I'm very excited because I did see some fellow Master Gardener volunteers on the attendance list, so hello to all of you, and then hello to everyone else who's joined today. Anytime I give a presentation, my goal is to help people take one nugget of information or fun fact away from the presentation. So I hope today that you'll be inspired to taste some flowers in your garden or perhaps plant some flowers, and we'll talk about different ways that you can use them. So I have a couple of discussion slides, and you're welcome to type in some information in the chat box. But I'm real curious if any of you have ever eaten an edible flower. And if you have, or even if you haven't, go ahead and type that information in the chat box. And library staff, if you want to help me out with the chat box, that'd be great too.
Great. So
Right.
I just typed in that I like the spicy ones, and we have an attendee who asks if the hibiscus tea, if that counts as an edible flower.
It does count, and we're actually going to talk about that a little bit later in the presentation, so very good. It sounds like a few people have tried edible flowers. Edible flowers, it's not a new concept, although you'll probably see it in fancy restaurants or maybe trying it yourself is new, but many cultures have integrated edible flowers in the foods that they eat for many, many years. So it goes all the way back to the Romans, the Chinese use them, Middle Eastern and Indian cultures, and even the Victorian era. So we're going to talk a little bit about how to incorporate them into the different foods and desserts and salads that we make. So feel free to go ahead and list what kind of flowers that you've eaten. There are many different types. Lots of them are easily grown here in Florida, which is pretty exciting because I enjoy it. I can just walk out my back door and pick some different things from the garden and toss that on a soup or in a salad or even on a taco. So there's lots of different ways that you can try edible flowers. So feel free to type in what kind you ate. And also, if you have any ideas of why it would be a great thing to grow edible flowers, go ahead and type that in and share that information.
So we have some attendees who are chiming in that they, like me, have some nasturtiums that they like to use for their food, and also some rose petals.
Very good. We'll talk about both of those. Those are two of the easiest and easy to grow plants, but easiest to also use in cooking. So we'll definitely talk about both of those plants. So some reasons that you might want to grow edible flowers is they're absolutely beautiful. I personally like to have flowers mixed in with my vegetable garden because I just think it adds some pizzazz to the garden. I work in a community garden at a medical center, and people are always drawn not only to the vegetable beds, but when they see all of the flowers blooming around the vegetables and then the butterflies seem to come in on cue, it makes the garden more interesting. And so I really enjoy mixing in the flowers with existing vegetables. So the beauty is important. It's a little bit something different, something that you can try. And also, if you're planting edible flowers, you're likely to attract butterflies and pollinators. And so by bringing in good insects, that could help with your vegetable yields because your plants get pollinated, but perhaps the beneficial insects can also help to reduce some of the pest insects. So these could be some secondary benefits of growing edible flowers. Edible flowers in the landscape or the garden can increase the diversity of plants. They are very easy to mix in, very easy for beginner or established gardeners to grow from seed. Some can serve dual purposes as a nice cut flower to bring into the house and enjoy. And it's also less expensive to grow them than to buy them. They'll liven up your dishes, and some of them have a nutrition content, which we'll talk briefly about and give you some resources to find out more information. So again, they'll elevate a dish. They have very different tastes, as you'll discover today during this talk, and they're perfect for a small space and if you want to save some money. And I did a quick search online just to kind of see what the going rate was for different edible flowers. And if you want a 6-ounce container of greens and edible flowers, some people are charging up to $30 for that. If you want different edible flowers such as alyssum and dianthus, you might pay a little over $13. And some dried flowers could go for $10 for just a few ounces. So, hey, you could grow these edible flowers and really have a great way to save some money, but then also to integrate that into your cooking. So there's many different ways that flowers taste. They taste different depending on the plant, and sometimes they taste different depending on the color of the plant and the age of the plant. So here are some different words that have been used to describe edible flowers. They might taste floral or tropical. Some of them could have a licorice or an anise flavor to them. Some might be nutty like a bean or a pea. Some of them are very intense, and we'll talk about those. Some I don't like, and some you might like. And then also there are some that have been described as a portobello mushroom, and that is one that we're going to introduce to you probably today, and it's going to be your homework if you have this plant in your neighborhood or in your yard. I want you to try it when you get home. All right, so lots of different ways to describe the edible flowers. Again, they're easy to mix into your landscape. You could put them into your vegetable beds. You can grow them in containers. In fact, that's what we do at the community garden that I'm working at. We have the beds with the vegetables in it. We've had a couple of edible flowers in the beds, but then at the end of the beds, we have large containers, and we're going to rotate the edible flowers that we plant in there just so that we can have this constant bloom and also things to enjoy. And throughout this presentation, you'll notice that I've sprinkled in some different plants. Many times you'll see the standards, like roses or marigolds or edible flowers, but don't forget about our native plants. There's lots of native plants that you could put in your landscape that are also edible. So prickly pear is a good example. I do want to remind you that if you're out in the wild, don't take any plants from, like a state park or something like that. But if you want to research these plants and try them at home or in your own landscape, we do have several native plants that you can try. So I talked briefly about nutrition. This is a great database from the USDA. It's called Dr. Duke's Phytochemical and Ethnobotanical Database, and it doesn't have every plant listed in here, but we mentioned nasturtiums, and what you can do is go to this page and type in different plants, and it will give you information about the entire plant. It will tell you about the seed, maybe about the shoot or the leaf. So if you want to look at a nasturtium and kind of figure out what the nutrition content is in the seed pod versus the leaf versus the flower, you can kind of get some very interesting information on this website. And it's USDA, so it's a vetted resource. Another book that I really appreciate, especially for Florida plants, is the picture of the cover on the left, A Beginner's Guide to Edible Florida. This is one that you can take with you out in the field, or if you're walking around your landscape, and use it to help you identify different plants. It gives you other ways that you can use them. I'm not going to get into some of the ways that you cook certain things, or here it talks about the traditional herbal uses of plants. You can discover that for yourself, but this is a really great resource that a lot of folks don't know about. So I have this book on my shelf and I use it frequently. So I just wanted to share that with you as well. Okay, so that brings me to a note on foraging. Be really careful if you're exploring an area and you're trying different plants. This might sound common sense, but I actually saw a woman who was on the side of, for those of you who are here in Hillsborough County, on the side of Highway 301 out by Hillsborough River State Park, and it looked like she was foraging on the side of the road. That's not a very good thing to do for many reasons. Those plants likely have gotten, chemicals or pesticides, maybe from the roads or just their proximity to the roads. It's also not safe, and you really want to make sure that you know your plant ID. So use caution. Be aware of your personal safety. If you're going to different areas, you might be in a spot where there's poison ivy, so know what things like that look like. Always start with small amounts, and you could even check, with a medical professional if you're concerned about eating something. But some plants, this is the disclaimer on the USDA website, which I like, all plants contain toxins and carcinogens. Even if you ingest common foods like peanuts, that could be fatally allergic to people who cannot eat peanuts. So this is not a one size fits all. You really want to use common sense and be careful and start with small quantities first. ID the plant properly. If you have trouble with plant ID, the UF IFAS Extension Hillsborough County has a free diagnostic plant clinic. So you could take pictures, you can take samples of plants and go to the extension office to get the help desk with Master Gardener volunteers and the extension agent to help you identify it. And then also use really great reference books and talk to fellow gardeners. You can get some great information from those folks. Again, be very careful. Some plants can make you sick, and you don't want to use pesticides or chemicals on any plants that you intend to eat, which also brings me to another important point. If you're looking at plants in your landscape and you think, oh, that's beautiful hibiscus, I want to try that, but you're not sure if the landscape has been sprayed with maybe an herbicide or something like that, or perhaps the lawn, just avoid it, don't eat it, be very careful and make sure that you're eating flowers that haven't been sprayed and are safe. And again, along that train of thought, don't eat flowers from nurseries or garden centers or florists if you're not really sure what the origin is. And also, I wasn't sure if you knew, but the UF IFAS Extension has an online bookstore. And the bookstore, you can go on the left-hand side and look for gardening, lawn, and landscape. There's a good resource of excellent publications. You can order online from the University of Florida Extension Bookstore. And here's 2 great books that you might want to take a look at. Okay, when we're harvesting edible flowers, just a couple of very simple tips. Pollen could be an allergen to many people, and usually the reproductive parts of plants don't necessarily taste the best. We mostly will eat the petals. So when you're looking at plants, we're going to do a really quick flower biology lesson here. You want to remove things like the stems or the stalks. You want to remove things like the leaves or the sepals. And the reproductive parts of the plant. So for example, the stamen contains the anther and the filament, that's the male part of the flower. And the pistil contains the stigma, style, and ovary. That's the female part of the flower. Don't eat these parts. They're not really going to have much of a flavor, and they can be allergen causing. So you want to avoid those. But it's very easy to pull a flower apart. And at the same time, you might learn a little bit about flower structure. And also keep in mind, not all flowers are perfect. They're called perfect if they have all these parts. Not all of them have all these parts. So again, you might learn a little bit about flower biology in the process. Okay, so in many flowers, only the petals are edible. Examples include chrysanthemums, roses, and just remove any of these parts that aren't considered edible. So harvesting flowers, pick them as you need them. Be gentle with the flowers. They're easily bruised or crushed. It's better to harvest them in the morning. They have a higher water content and may last longer. And also check for insects. The last thing you want to do is stick a flower in your mouth and it's covered with insects. So one native plant that you can eat is Spanish needles, Bidens alba. And I have noticed that sometimes Spanish needles has a lot of thrips on them, and thrips is a small insect that you can find on your plants. So you want to look for those insects, shake the plants, and check them and clean them. If you're looking for more information on thrips, you can go to UF and find publications on that. Simple ways to clean the flowers, just wash them in a bowl to remove dirt and insects. You can store them on a damp paper towel in the refrigerator in a container. You can even put them in a jar of water and use just before serving. Another example of an edible flower up at the top is a citrus flower. So I don't know if any of you have tried a citrus flower before, but they are very tasty. And orange flower water is something that's used in a lot of cultures to flavor different foods and drinks and desserts. Okay, so real quick, when you're harvesting edible flowers, take a look at this picture. Maybe think about what parts you would remove. Feel free to type it in the chat box. But to summarize, it's pretty easy. Just the stems or the stalks, the sepals or the leaves, and any of the bitter white part that might be at the base. And eat the petals and stay away from the reproductive parts because they could be allergen causing and they have less flavor. All right, so growing edible flowers from seed is very easy. You can go online to many different seed sources and they'll give you ideas and packets and sometimes even mixes that you can grow. I enjoy saving seeds because it helps save money over time. It's a good thing to get kids to learn how to save seeds and harvest those seeds from the old flower heads. But I also like it because if you pick seeds, you can choose your own varieties. So this picture on the right-hand side is a picture of some marigold flowers. This is a marigold called Cracker Jack, and I really like this one because it gets very big and it's big, puffy orange and yellow flowers. So I like to save the seeds from the Cracker Jack marigolds and then plant those and get more plants out of them. So it's a very easy thing to do. And again, you have a little bit more control over what you're going to plant in your garden. Harvest often and replant often, because then you'll do some succession planting and you'll have constant blooms. Nasturtiums, for example, go to seed very easily, and once they start going to seed, they may die back. So if you're continually planting, then you're extending the season for that plant or crop, and then you can enjoy it for a longer period of time. On the bottom left is another native plant called elderberry, and elderberry is considered sweet or fragrant. You definitely want to check this one for insects. You can use it in drinks, but be very careful about eating the berries. You can only cook the right berries. If you try to harvest things like the uncooked berries, it could really upset your stomach. So this is one that's mildly toxic, and again, you just want to use caution when you're trying things. All right, so here we have a typical salad way to use edible flowers. This looks pretty basic. You've got your green and your red leaf lettuce, but by adding your edible flowers, you can really see how you could jazz that up and add a pop of color and some texture and maybe even some flavor. Quick disclaimer, at the community garden that I work at, we did a little pop-up taste test for employees, and we had different vegetables and greens for people to try. So we had some lettuces, we had some radish, and we had some edible flowers. I thought everyone was going to be excited to eat a flower on their lunch break. I just figured, wow, this is cool. They'll love it. Turns out a lot of people don't like to eat flowers. So just be aware that they taste strange to different people, and folks may or may not like them. So I think it's good to try these, but they may not be as, folks may not enjoy them as much as others. So that's my little disclaimer. So we're going to talk about some specific edible flowers that you can grow in your garden. The first one is a daylily. And I don't know if you all knew you could eat this. Maybe some of you do. But daylily flavors have been described as crunchy. They taste like asparagus, maybe like a green bean or like a lettuce. So you can sample a daylily and figure out for yourself how it tastes to you. Some of the literature said that they thought the yellow ones were the sweetest. That could be an experiment that you can try and see if you agree or disagree with that. Lots of ways to use them. I like the idea of stuffing them with cheese. That sounds like a really great way to eat a daylily. And you can add them to soups and stews. Again, remove that bitter white base, and then just use caution because they could upset your stomach, so use in moderation. And if you want information on how to grow different plants, a really great source is to go to Ask IFAS. And here's a publication on daylilies for Florida, but you can go to Ask IFAS and pretty much type in anything. So I gave you an example of edible flowers, and then it will come up with a list of publications that are free and available for you. Another thing is to do an online web search and just type in what you're looking for and add UF after it. So if I was looking for edible flowers, I put UF after it and get UF publications. It's really great because it's specific to Florida and very helpful. Much of it is vetted and research, and it's useful information. So the one that many of you mentioned that you've tried is a nasturtium. These are fabulous edible flowers, and they're beautiful plants. You can eat the flowers, the leaves, or the seed pods. They do pack a punch, so they're going to taste peppery and intense. But I like the idea of adding them to sandwiches, creating savory butters. And when you have these in your garden, they will always be visited by beneficial insects, including butterflies. Easy one to grow from seed. This is a good one to get kids to try. I've had a lot of high school kids that come over and volunteer with me, and this is one that they always want to sample. So it's a really great plant to get in your garden. There's also trailing and upright types. So if you're buying them from seed, take a look at that and figure out which ones that you like the best. You could try pansies, and pansies have been described as tasting like wintergreen. I like the idea of using them in desserts or fruit salads. I went to a nutrition class at Extension on Tuesday, and they had an apple salad, so I could see putting pansies in an apple salad. Easy to grow in pots. This is one you want to grow when it's cool outside. And again, be careful where you're sourcing these. It's better to grow them yourself as opposed to finding these at nurseries and not knowing if they have been treated with anything. We did mention roses. So roses have been described as strawberries, green apple, fruity, minty. Sometimes some sources think that the darker flowers taste better than the lighter colored roses. I don't know. That's another thing that you can try and do your own taste test. But you can use these in lots of things. You can freeze them in ice cubes. I really like that idea. And again, make sweet butters with them or garnish desserts. Not sure if you are able to grow roses or you don't know if roses would be easy for you. UF has great publications on growing roses in Florida. I like the second one on tough roses for Florida. The roses that I grow, an example is Smith's Parish, and it's very simple, very hardy, and doesn't take a lot of work. I want to mention marigolds because they have a spicy and citrusy flavor. These you can harvest anytime and put them in on salads and sandwiches. You can put them with fruit. They're a great cut flower. They reseed easily. Remember I mentioned that we collect the seeds and replant them. I did want to put in a little plug about marigolds and nematodes. Nematodes can affect vegetable plants in the root system. Not all marigolds are good for nematodes. So if you want to investigate that myth versus fact, I recommend taking a look at this publication. And if you grow marigolds that repel nematodes, you may actually be able to do double duty in your garden because you can eat those and then the marigold is having a beneficial effect. But not all marigolds are great for nematodes. So take a look at that for further research. So as we mentioned, there's lots of different ways to incorporate edible flowers into your drinks, the foods that you eat, your parties, even just having a nice little picnic. So I encourage you to get creative, and you could probably come up with ways that I didn't even include in this presentation. If you come up with more ideas, feel free to reach out to us, contact us at the Extension office, and let us know, how you use something, what you thought about it, or what you tried. A couple of plants on this list I didn't know were edible until I did my research for this talk. So I'm going to point out that I actually tried a begonia in my backyard, and I tried a tuberous begonia. It is very tart, and I thought it was kind of sour, but some people might like that flavor. So if you're growing begonias, I would suggest that you give that one a try. Remember, remove the leaves and remove that yellow reproductive part in the middle and just eat the petals. Another one that I tried for the first time are impatiens. And I was growing some of these. I made my husband come out and try an impatient with me. And we're like, I don't know if it has much of a flavor, but it was just kind of fun to eat an impatient in the backyard. So that's another piece of homework for you all if you want to try that plant as well. Wood sorrel on the bottom right, that's a easy to find plant in Florida. It does taste kind of sour. So be ready for that. I know as a kid, we always ate like 4-leaf clovers and things in the backyard. So it kind of reminded me of that. Again, Spanish needles. This is a plant that's edible and you can eat the flowers, infuse it in a drink. You can imagine if you're using basil flowers that it could depend on the type of basil, whether it's a Thai basil, a lemon basil, and you could put that in savory dishes or even drinks. And spiderwort is another one I want to point out. That is a very easy to grow native plant, and you can enjoy the flowers of that as well. So we're not going to go into all of these on the next 3 slides, but you will get a copy of the presentation. And this just gives you some ideas of ways that you can use these flowers. Most herb flowers are edible. They're very easy to grow, and they have a taste that's similar to the leaf, but sometimes it could be a little spicier or it could be milder depending on the type of herb. So if you let your herbs go a little bit longer and go to flower, then you can harvest those flowers and try them. The bottom right is a society garlic, which is considered an ornamental plant in Florida, but the flowers are edible. This is one that when I tried it, it really surprised me. And that one was a little too intense for my taste. So you might want to try it, but I ate it and I thought, oh my gosh, I'm never going to get rid of this flavor. So give it a shot if you're so inclined. Also think in terms of, savory versus sweet. What types of vegetables might taste best with the different herbs? Lots of different choices there. Flowers, there are so many different flowers that are edible. Some of them, different parts are edible. Again, like the gladiolas, for example, you want to definitely remove the anthers. Hibiscus, that is one that can taste tart or acidic. You could soak that and make a tea out of it. I did want to point out pineapple guava. If you're ever at the extension office, they have some really beautiful standard pineapple guava trees. And so that's an edible flower. The one that I want you to go home and try as an experiment is porterweed. I didn't know you could eat the flower of a porterweed, and the picture is in the top right of this slide. And I was even more suspicious when I read that it tasted like a portobello mushroom. I thought, there's no way. There's no way this can taste like a mushroom. Sure enough, I went out, tasted the porterweed, and it did, in fact, taste like a portobello mushroom. So the author of the edible plants for Florida says, maybe add this to trail snacks or to salads. So here you can go ahead and sample. These are just some different ideas, and it includes some native plants and some ornamental plants. Most vegetable flowers are also edible. So for example, arugula, you could let that go to flower and it's going to be spicy and peppery. Broccoli flowers, mustard flowers, you could eat okra flowers, radishes. Those are just some of the examples. The caveat is don't eat some of the ornamental things like an ornamental sweet pea. That's actually toxic. So that's why your plant ID will be very important. But again, most flowers of vegetables are safe to eat. And on the right-hand side, this isn't necessarily a vegetable, but I just wanted to show you that you can eat a native plant called Yucca filamentosa. It has very crunchy petals. It supposedly tastes like an artichoke. I haven't tried this one yet. But again, just try a small amount because it could upset your stomach. So a quick summary on different gardening tips. Remember, easy to start from seed. Pots are excellent to grow edible flowers. Your seed packets, read those. That will give you information about how deep to plant the seed, when you can harvest, what time of year to plant it. You want to keep your seeds watered for good germination, keep them moist. Fertilize your plants every few weeks. That will keep them growing. And of course, if you're deadheading old spent flowers, you could compost those flower heads and hopefully get a continual succession of bloom that you can enjoy, and then avoid pesticides if possible. Or if you have to use something that's a pesticide, make sure it's labeled for use on edible crops. And on your right, you'll see a southern plantain. That's another one that you can use the flower spikes, raw or sauteed. So your library, our Hillsborough County Public Library, is an excellent resource. I found a couple of really simple recipes that I think I'm going to try. I went to the HCPLC website and typed in edible flowers and had a huge resource of books and materials that I could check out. So this basil lemonade sounded really good to me. And you're just muddling your basil and your basil flowers and making a simple syrup and then mixing that with water and lemon juice. So that to me is something that I think would be great this summer. And this book called Recipes from the Garden had lots of edible flower recipes, from herb blends to confetti salad to rose petal honey, even a lavender tinted vichyssoise, which I thought was pretty interesting. So simple recipes to just elevate dishes, try something new, and be creative in the kitchen. And last couple of recipes. This one is also from the same book. You could make these really beautiful canapes with nasturtium flowers and some cheese and crackers. And the riot of color salad on the left, there's just simple greens that have been added to with pansies and looks like nasturtiums and maybe calendula or marigolds. So you can really kind of get a feel for how interesting you can make everyday cooking just by harvesting edible flowers from your garden. Lastly, you can use edible flowers in things like different vinegars. You can pickle sunflowers and you can freeze them in ice cubes. So lots of different ways to integrate edible flowers. If you need more information or you're really interested in diving into this topic, definitely check out the Extension Help Desk. The Master Gardener volunteers can provide diagnostics and help with plant ID. Again, I mentioned the library, a huge resource and where I continue to learn every day. And then talking to other gardeners, going to seed swaps and plant sales. And I also listed 2 publications on the right. I don't necessarily endorse these particular websites, but I thought they had great kind of charts and tips on growing edible flowers and how to use them. So if you're interested in typing in the chat box what you learned from this talk or what you might want to try, that would be great to let us know. We're going to open it up to Q&A in just a moment. And I also would love for you to try some of these flavors and flowers and see if you agree with the flavors. Does it taste like wintergreen? Does it taste peppery? Does it taste bland or mild or bitter? And see what you find out and do your own taste test at home and enjoy cooking with your edible flowers. The Extension Office also has great resources online, on social media, and on YouTube. So please visit any of these sites to get additional information. And if you have questions or you have feedback, then you're welcome to email us at the Master Gardener email listed there on the slide. So Lisa, do you want to open it up to Q&A or comments?
Yeah, I see we have some questions already that have already come in during the program. So let me get my slides up here.
Okay.
Here we go. Yeah. While I'm getting that loaded up, Chris and I are going to be going through the questions that have come in so far already. So definitely keep typing those in there for us. Let me get to the right slide over here. All right. So I've got a QR up there that'll also bring you to the Master Gardener website where they have all of their contact information, their help desk, their social media, all of that. And while we're reading your questions, I'm going to have Chris tell you a little bit about some library resources that you might be interested in.
Okay, sure. We posted, there's a couple of books here, The Edible Flower Garden and Botanical Baking. And these are just a couple examples of what you can find doing a quick search on our website. If you just search for edible flowers, we chose these because they look like great selections, but they're also available digitally. So if you can't wait to get into the library to pick them out, you can just go online and check them out electronically.
You got to love the ebooks and digital books for that low impulse control. I need to look this up and explore this some more right now. All right. So while Nicole was presenting, I have to admit, I went on a wild goose chase because I forgot how much she talks about the different parts of the flower and how you have to be careful which parts you use. So I added in a second library resource for you at the very last minute here while we were live. The library has educational models and tools that you can check out we call it Realia. It's 3D objects that you can borrow from the library. We have those at our John F. Germany Library downtown and at the Seffner Mango Library in the eastern part of Hillsborough County. So if you wanted to learn a little bit more about the different parts of the flower and like maybe get that big scale model to explore that, definitely recommend checking that out. So Chris, thanks for those great book options too. So we do have some questions that have come in already. A number of folks were super excited to hear about the nasturtiums again. And they were wondering if there were health benefits to eating flowers. And you touched on that briefly, that one of the websites has information on the chemical composition of the different flowers that folks can look up.
Yes, you can go to that website. It won't be comprehensive because, sometimes they may not have information on every plant that we can grow, but it's a good starting point. It's also USDA, so it's vetted information. You could also try the plant that you're looking for, nutritional content, sometimes searching for .edu, and then you might get an educational website. Or if you want to try searching through Extension, different research universities might have that information for you.
And Nicole, just a heads up, your camera is not on for right now. So if you wanted to pop that on, that control should be open for you. We had another question that came in about growing nasturtiums, if they can grow year round here in Florida.
Yes, you can grow nasturtiums year round. Sometimes in the heat of summer, if they're in full sun, they might get a little bit leggy. So I actually plant them in some part sun, part shade, and that seems to do very well for them. And then I'm continually planting nasturtiums. If we do get some cold weather, they will get hit by the cold. So you want to cover them, or just understand that if we do have a freeze, then they won't make it. But most of the year you can grow them.
Oh, great. There were several folks who were as excited as I was about the porterweed. I am a huge fan of porterweed. I always have it growing in my garden. I love how it's continuously putting out its little stalk of purple. So there were a lot of folks that were very surprised about that they were edible and that they taste like portobellos of all things.
Yeah, that was surprising to me too. So I thought it was crazy. I mean, after I read it, I immediately had to walk out back and pick one and eat it. And I said, well, it does kind of taste like a portobello. So
I know exactly what I'm doing after our program.
That would make me really happy if that's like the nugget that folks took away and they actually go out and try one of those.
So we have a question about magnolia flowers. One of the attendees, their sweet bay is currently flowering, and they were wondering about if those were edible.
Yes, they are edible. The book that I mentioned at the very beginning, The Beginner's Guide to Edible Florida, that has a deep dive into some of these different plants and how you can use them. But for the sweet bay magnolia, you can use the leaves, petals, and the bark. The leaves actually have been used before as a bay leaf substitute, so that's something to note. And you can pickle the peppers and even make a sweet and sour relish out of it. So it does have a strong flavor, so you might want to use that one sparingly. But try to research or get access to this book, because that will really help you with the field ID and then how you can use it.
Fantastic.
Great. And Nicole, we do have someone who's wondering if there are any flowers that we should absolutely avoid.
Yes, there's a lot of flowers you should absolutely avoid. Just off the top of my head, most lilies, you can't eat lilies. They could be toxic or poisonous. So stay away from those. The ones that we talked about here are pretty much tried and true, but if you're not certain, then definitely ask, get a second opinion from the Extension Office. The Extension Office, I know, has a couple of resources about poisonous plants, and they can go through and maybe like cross-reference and determine if that plant is poisonous or not. So that's a really great publication. It's Poisonous Plants of Florida, if I remember correctly.
Okay, great.
Yeah, so if you don't know, don't try it.
Okay. Are there any trees that have edible bark? Someone is wondering.
Yeah. There's trees that you can use the needles, you can use the flowers. Again, going more into the edible Florida plants, you'll find more of the information on the multiple uses of different parts of a plant, especially some of our native trees and plants. So like pine, for example, you can eat the pine nuts from the pine cones, you can make the pine needles into a tea, but you just want to do your research before you go out and start eating and harvesting.
Very good. Well, I have a question that I'm wondering, when you mentioned the tacos, I'm a big taco fan. Do you have a recommendation for what would be a good flower to add to a taco?
You could add, different things like the arugula flowers. I think marigolds would look really great. The individual petals sprinkled on a taco, or a tostada, or a taco salad. But, try it and you might find your own that you really like putting on them. So I would probably start with marigolds. I like arugula flowers. Any of the vegetable flowers would be good too.
Oh, I love that. Thank you.
You're welcome.
All right, folks, I have dropped a link to our program survey in the chat box. So just a reminder, we would love it if you'd fill that out on your way out when you're finished. We want to make the kind of programs that you want to watch, so we would love it if you would fill that out. Let us know how we're doing and what kinds of topics you'd like to see us talk about and cover in the future. So grab that link for yourself. We'd love to hear from you. I'm going to start going through our contact information here. If we get one or two more questions in, we can probably still squeeze them in. But remember, you can always reach the library at hcplc.org/contact. That page has all of the many ways that you can reach us on it, including our phone number, 813-273-3652. And we do have the link for the Master Gardener program in the chat, but you can also email them at hillsmg@mail.ufl.edu. And we hope you can join us next month. We're going to be talking about growing veggies and herbs. So some of the ones we saw today, we know we can eat their flowers, but if we let those grow to full veg and herb, we're going to explore that next month. So join us for that on May 17th. It's up on our calendar. You can register for that to get that reminder when it's time. So we would love to see you for that program as well. Let's see, do we have any last minute questions come in, Chris? I think we've got it covered.
I think we have it covered. Just some
awesome.
Thanks.
Well, if you want to catch up on this program or any of our virtual programs afterwards, we do have a YouTube channel for the library. So we post those pretty quickly after a program, usually within a week or two. So you can always catch up after the fact there. I'll drop that link into our chat here as well. And thank you so much, Nicole. I love this program. You gotta love having your cake and eating it too, but in a crunchy vegetable way. It's so pretty and so useful. I love exploring this, and I'm so glad that you were able to show us some new and interesting things, especially that porterweed.
I know. I think people are going to try that. Yeah, it's just fun. It's interesting. It's a little bit of a different element to gardening. And if you love to cook like I do, then it kind of combines two passions. And of course, if you have all these beautiful flowers, then you're going to get the butterflies and the insects too. So it's fun to do. So thanks everyone for listening today, and reach out to us if you have questions. But I hope you're inspired to try something new.
I definitely am. Thank you, folks. We will see you next time. Thank you, Chris, for helping wrangle the
Good night.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye-bye.
Take care, folks.